general cleaning. Okay? You use this full strength, it'll take the finish off your car. Okay? It will bubble grease out of the concrete. So if you have a stubborn area, you can use this full strength on the concrete. Work it in for about 15 minutes and then power wash it off. But generally, remove the grease, and that's it. You can do it reverse. We open up the pores, then we soften all that grease and actually go down deeper in the slab and create a problem later on. And no primers, no ventilation. For what we're showing today, are there any questions before we move on to the actual questions? Any questions on the rest? Bond breaker? I'd like to stress it, we'll talk again about it tomorrow. You'll hear me say the same thing, plus a little more. It is that important. It doesn't matter how good you make this look. It comes up, here. Scott, you want to take over a little bit on Spray-Deck? Sure. All right, thanks, Tim. Okay, guys, we're going to talk about our Spray-Deck overlay system. So that is in itself the system. The tools that you guys need for that system are you want a broom, scraper, hopper gun. Be okay. You want to make sure you put a sealer on those grips. Grab onto that. It's a good looking product. At this point, a lot of people, it's hard to clean it. None of the pressure washers outside of running water. Different orifices on the front, and then you do have your dial. You got your dial on the front, and you also have your gauge on the side when you want to change your PSI. You want to stay between 3 to 7 PSI. So what Scott's talking about here with the orifice and the sizes. Okay, we've got 5 holes in the face of this gun. With Spray-Deck, we recommend you start out with the second to largest. And between the size of this orifice and the air pressure that he just mentioned, that's what dictates your look, right? The size, texture that you spray out. So you can deviate from that a little bit if you want to create your own look, or you like a little bit smaller texture or larger texture. But to start out and to reproduce what we're showing, it's second to largest orifice and then 3 to 5 psi. This is a great tool to have, feature to have, I should say. As you do a couple jobs, you'll actually know by the sound of the grout coming out where your air pressure is. That sounds crazy, but it's that big of a difference. Until then, there's a dial, a gauge on the compressor. You just set it to 3 to 5 psi. That's one reason why we're using this direct vane compressor, is you can't set a shop compressor for your nail gun down to 3.5 or 4 psi. Not going to happen. Every time it kicks on, you're going to get a surge of air, and your texture is going to change. And you're going to see that every 10 minutes, however long it takes that compressor to kick back on that job, believe it or not. So those are the little things that you'll pick up here at the seminars that will make a difference on your job versus maybe somebody. don't do it an hour before you spray. One thing we did here is we are spraying a contrasting color. These overlays get real bright in the sunlight. You can hardly see the texture in front on that pad. Now we have a buff over white, white over gray, gray over buff. As long as it's a contrast, it'll be a lot easier for you to see application.
See how the guys taking that? Here's the remote to the application. Want to keep that. You're typically going for about 70% coverage. And then it goes down to
So we're talking about spraying off the edge. You see where I'm standing? He got grout on my shoe, almost 2 feet over. Okay? He's doing it right. The point I want to make here is mask.
We always suggest knocking down in a half moon circle. If you find that the material is rolling up, as it's doing a little bit here, it's a little too early. Does that make sense?
So we want to knock it down in one direction. If we go back and forth, we're going to try to pull that product back up. Okay, it's not going to look as good. So one motion left to right or right to left, kind of a half moon, and keep moving. This product hasn't been down 4 minutes since he sprayed, and it's ready to knock down. Imagine August, right? So if it's August and it's 2 in the afternoon, you need to dampen your surface, you need to use retarder, you need to adhere to some of those hot weather tips. All we did here was that cool resin, okay, and this is perfect. You don't want it laying open for 10 minutes. You want that person knocking down. He's almost going to have grout sprayed on his heels as they're going across that job. All right, that's a good timing. But don't forget about it. Don't go take a phone call on a break and come back. Can everybody see those pieces I've broken off? So this is 24 hours after we apply it. All those high spots you just scraped off, if we don't do that, they're going to walk off our foot traffic. The customer's going to call you and say the deck's falling apart. Anthony's doing here is taking a clean, stiff bristle broom. It doesn't look like that important of a step, right? Some of you probably think, I got a big gas leaf blower. Through the brush, you got to use that stiff broom. Okay, it's going to get all those pieces out of the nooks and crannies. It's very important. It's probably the most difficult part of this step, or this process, because you got to use a lot of elbow grease.
Have VOC compliance also. You always want to go with 2 coats, and you always want to have that roller grid inside your 5-gallon bucket. Typically this is your 3rd day, your 3rd or 4th day, depending on how you guys work. And Spray-Deck is typically done on the 2nd or 3rd day, and then you're going to seal it on your 3rd day. Sometimes if you're in Florida, you can get it done in 2 days. The stain does penetrate. It is not a paint. People do refer to it as a paint, and you want to try and not apply this during the day at this time. Okay? But during the heat of the day, you want to try to avoid applying this. and that goes for our clear seal as well. Usually early morning, late afternoon. Anthony's rolling on our pewter, maybe sable. So we've got our sable gray. These are all our standard colors from the standard ink creek color chart. We always are a big fan of driving that into the pores. You could spray, but we always, if you do spray, you want to back roll. You've got a larger job. Minimum of 2 coats. This Spray-Deck and Texturecrete will absorb any kind of sealer or stain.
You have to roll it, or do you spray it?
You can roll it or spray it. We're a big fan of driving it into the pores of the concrete. If you do spray it, you would want to back roll it.
Yeah, you want that mechanical action on at least that first coat to get the penetration and the coverage. Truth be known, you'll get a little bit more coverage per gallon or per pail if you roll it out nice and thin. Believe it or not, that's because when you go to spray it, anybody ever painted stucco with a sprayer? And then when you get to the end of the job and you look from this angle, you see you missed that whole portion, you got to go back. So you tend to overspray to try to fill everything in, and then you've got one thick coat. It doesn't penetrate as well, and it doesn't go as far. So we always like to stress rolling on at least that first coat, get that mechanical action, and if you must, and again, on a large job, we understand time is money, and spray that second coat.
How long do you wait in between coats?
It really depends on the weather. You know, where you're local, so you might be able to get the second coat done in the same day. Probably.
Tack-free, a day like today, maybe an hour.
Yeah, it's going to be tack-free, yeah.
If I did a skin coat, I could spray that on within a couple hours. Right? 90 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. Here in the southeast, you know, mainly in Florida, but yeah, good question. He said, you know, if he does a skim coat, he can spray that on the same day. Yeah, that's why I'm kind of jumping back and forth. You know, Spray-Deck here in the southeast or in Florida could be a 2-day process. Typically, it's a 3-day process, but yeah, you could get it done in 2 days. But the older technology, Spray-Deck is more that's why I want to do that. Better technology, and it really depends on the soil. You know, all those guys are okay, well, you got black wool that determines how to fit. But again, I want to go with the lighter colors in the Spray-Deck. Typically